G'day, I'm Yuki-san Dev, and in part 19 of the series Unity for the Absolute Beginner, we will take a look at audio and the particle system. Okay, so today it's all about getting sound in the game and some particle effects. Well, what good is a game without audio and some special effects? It's something I haven't touched on yet in the series, so we'll start the ball rolling with today's video. So let's get into it. Alrighty, so we have a fresh, clean 3D project open, and I will start by setting up the scene for today's bits. If you are following along, then there are some files you will need in my GitHub. The link is in the description, so go and grab them. Otherwise, let's go. So firstly, let's click on the main camera and change from skybox to a solid color. And I'm going to change mine to black. Now let's right click the hierarchy and create a plane. I'm going to name mine ground and reset its transform. Now click on the camera again and drag the Z position until the edge of the plane is at the bottom. Should be around -6 point something-ish. Now right click in your project window and create a materials folder. And right click the materials folder and create a new material. I'm going to call mine green since that's going to be the color. Click on the green material and change the albedo color to green. Now drag the material onto the plane either in the scene or in the hierarchy. Cool. Now right click the hierarchy and create a cube. I'm going to name mine block and reset its transform as well. And lock the XYZ scale and scale it down to 0.5. Now drag the cube up in the air so that it can drop. And give it a little rotate so that you can see more than one side. If you'd like to copy my numbers, then here you go. It might actually be a good idea to have them the same as mine for what's coming up. Okay, now if you have grabbed the files from my GitHub, then drag in the creeper.png into the project. And you can put it in an images folder if you like, just to keep things tidy. And now drag the creeper image onto the cube. Okay, that's the basic setup done for the scene. Let's get on to the audio. Alright, so just quickly, there are three parts to the basic audio system. There is the audio listener, the audio source, and the audio clip. The audio listener, which is actually already in the scene by default in the main camera, it always is. With it in the camera, we are pretty much guaranteed to hear it all the time because that's what we're always following. Also note there can only be one listener per scene. The audio source, think of it like a player, and the clip is the piece. It's either an MP3, an AIFF, OGG, or a WAV, I think is what it supports. Think of it kind of like you have some Bluetooth speakers. They are the listener, and then your source would be your mobile phone. And then the song you're playing on the mobile phone would be the clip. So the first thing we're going to do is play some in-game music. It doesn't require any scripting, so if you are following along with my GitHub files again, then drag all the audio straight into the project and put it in an audio folder just to be tidy. Otherwise, if you have some other kind of music you'd like to play, then just drag that into your project and follow along. Now click on the main camera, and as you can see already by default we have the audio listener in for the scene. Now we will click add component, and if you search for audio you should get an option there to choose audio source. And then drop the source down once you've added it, and we can add the clip. You can just click the audio clip selector and select, if you're following along, Minecraft Calm or any other music you might have dragged in. By the way, all compatible audio you have in your project will be listed here to choose from. Now we want to make sure that play on awake is enabled so that when the game runs, it plays. And I might as well put loop on as well so it repeats. I won't touch anything else in here for this video, but as you can see, there's a lot of options and more that you don't see. Only one you might be playing with at this point is volume. After other sounds get added to the game, you'll have to tweak the volumes. The volume here only affects this particular source. Okay, so now we can press play. Cool, music. So now let's put some sound effects in with the script. So firstly, let's select the block and then add component and add another audio source. Okay, we don't need to put a clip in here because we're going to use more than one clip and we will control it with the script. But do make sure that play on awake is off and loop is off. And let's make a scripts folder in the project. And right click the folder and create a C# script. Going to name mine block. And drag the script onto the block object. And just double check that it's attached. Alrighty, let's double click the script to open it. Okay, so the first thing we need is a reference to more than one audio clip, so we will make an array. So right after the first curly bracket of the class, type in public audio clip, and then 2 empty square brackets, and then audio clips. Remember we covered arrays briefly in part 12 of the series. The 2 empty square brackets turns this variable into an array. Okay, we also need access to the audio source, so we'll make a container to put it in. So private audio source, audio source. Now in the start method, we need to actually get the audio source components. So let's type in audio source equals get component audio source. Now, before we do anything else, let's just get back into the editor. Click the block object and under block script, audio clips, type in the number 2 and press enter. And this will give us 2 slots to assign some audio clips. And if you are following along with the files from my GitHub, then drag lighter into the first slot and sonic into the second slot. Cool, now let's get back in the script. Now we will create a new function, and this one is actually a built-in function to listen for a mouse click on this object, which of course is the block. I don't think we've actually done this so far in the series, so this is something new. So type in private void OnMouseDown. And some curly brackets should have popped up underneath. If they didn't, then add them. And in between the curlies, type in audio source dot clip equals audio clips, and then in square brackets 0. And then audio source dot play. And while we're at it, let's just delete the update method in the script because we won't actually be using it for this video. Okay, so what we've done, we've created a container to hold our audio source component and named it audio source. We created an array named audio clips to hold all the clips we want to play. Then we got the actual component audio source from the block object. Then we used a built-in function that detects if you click the mouse on this object. If the object is clicked, then we've specified what the clip is to use. In this case, it's 0, which is the lighter clip. Then play the clip. Easy. Alrighty, let's save. Press play. Alrighty, music's still playing. And click the creeper. There it is. Plays the sound. Cool. So now we want the cube to drop when we click it and then bounce when it hits the ground, and each time it bounces, play a sound. So first we need to give the block a rigid body so it can actually drop. So click on the block object and add component and search for rigid body and add rigid body. And let's set its drag to 0.5 so it doesn't drop too fast. And make sure gravity is off. We want it to stay up in the air until we click it. Now we're also going to need a physics material on this so it can bounce. So right click in your project window and create a physics material. I'm going to call mine the usual bounce. And set its bounciness to 1. And bounce combined to maximum. And finally click on the block object in your hierarchy again, and under Box Collider, select Bounce for the material. Alright, we're all set to script, so let's get back into our block script. Alrighty, so we're going to need the rigid body of this block, so let's do private rigid body block RB. And then in start, we need to retrieve the actual rigid body component. So block RB equals get component rigid body. Alrighty, now we can just make the block drop when we click on it. So in our mouse down function, type block RB dot use gravity equals true. So it's going to toggle gravity to true or on if you like. So then of course the block will drop. And it should bounce all by itself because we put the bounce physics material on it, and it will collide with the ground and bounce. Now we want sound to play each time the block collides with the ground. So we need a collision function to handle that. So if you are using Visual Studio, you can just start typing on collision and you should be able to select the built-in function. Otherwise you'll have to type all this in. And then in between the curlies, type in audio source dot clip equals audio clips 1. And then again, audio source dot play. So this is just like above, only this time we are playing the second clip, Sonic. Alright, I think we're ready to test this, so let's save and run. And let's click the block. Cool. So it made the sound when we clicked it, and then it played a sound each time it hit the ground. Cool. Kind of got a bit crazy there at the end because it hits so quickly, but you get the idea and it will do for now. So that's a quick basic rundown of audio. I'm actually going to do one more thing with sound if you are keen to continue on. I want the block to be destroyed the 4th time it hits the ground and also play an explosion sound. So it gets to bounce around a few times and then blows up. The reason I'm going with the 4th time is because after 4 bounces, the cube gets a bit crazy and doesn't sound good. If you use different numbers than me so far in the video, like maybe with rotation or gravity, you might have to use a different amount of bounces. So there is a problem though. If I put the audio to be played when the block is destroyed inside the block script, it's not going to play because the block along with the script will be destroyed, so the sound can't play. It probably plays it for like a 100th of a second, you'd barely hear it, and then poof, the object is gone. So we're going to need to do it a different way. We need to create an empty prefab with the sound attached to it so that we can instantiate it when the block gets destroyed. So first let's create an empty object in the hierarchy. I'm going to name mine Destroy Explosion. Then add an audio source to our Destroy Explosion. And we're going to put a sound in the audio clip. Now, if you are following along with my GitHub files, then put explosion in there. And also make sure that play on awake is enabled this time, and loop is not enabled. So when we instantiate this object, it's going to stay in the scene forever. We don't want that, so we need to destroy it after it's played the sound. So let's create a script in our scripts folder and name it Destroy Timer. And drag the script onto the Destroy Explosion object. And now double click the script to open it. So we just need one line in here in the start method. It's just destroy game object, comma 4. So this will just simply wait 4 seconds and then destroy the object it's attached to. Gives it enough time to play the sound. And so let's save. And now we can drag the Destroy Explosion object into the project window to create a prefab. And let's make a folder for it too. And now we can delete that from the scene. Alright, so now real quick, just run the game and then drag the prefab into the hierarchy and just make sure that it plays the sound, and then after 4 seconds it disappears. All right, we're almost there. So now we just need to instantiate this prefab inside the block script. So let's get back inside the block script. Okay, so first of all, we need to count the number of bounces. So we need to make a variable to hold the count. So private int bounces equals 0. Then we need a reference to the prefab we just created so we can instantiate it. So public game object destroyed explosion. Okay, now down in our collision function, above the existing 2 lines, type in bounces ++, and then if bounces is greater than 3, and then between the curlies, type in instantiate destroyed explosion, and then destroy game object. And finally, return. Alright, so we have a reference to the explosion object, which we will instantiate, and we'll assign that in a minute in the editor. Bounces with the 2+ signs is just telling the script to add 1 each time. So we're basically just counting the amount of times the block collides with the ground. Then our if statement is, of course, saying that if the number of bounces is greater than 3, i.e. 4, then instantiate the prefab we just made into the scene. And destroy the object the script's attached to, which is, of course, the block. And then return just stops the rest of the code in this function, so it won't play what's underneath. Alrighty, so let's save. And click on our block object, and you should see the destroyed explosion container we made. And drag the prefab destroy explosion into the field. Alright, let's run it. And click the block. Cool. So on the 4th bounce, the block was destroyed, and our prefab that only contains a sound was instantiated and then destroyed itself after 4 seconds. Enough time to actually play the sound. Cool bananas. But you know what would be better? If we added some particles when the block gets destroyed. Make it look a little bit more like an explosion. Well, if you're keen for that, then let's continue. So the particle system itself is huge. It's massive, and you could spend hours designing all kinds of cool stuff with this. You've only got to jump on Unity's asset store to see some really cool stuff. So I'm not going to go in depth with all that. I'll just cover bringing the system in and playing it. So with that being said, let's click in the hierarchy and select Effects and Particle System. I'm just going to leave the default name for this one and reset its transform. Alright, so like I said, you could spend hours on this, but I'm just going to do something very simple. So first of all, I'm going to set the rotation on X to 270, so it actually explodes the right way. I'm going to set my duration to 1, and looping off, start lifetime 3, start speed 1. Start size I'm going to change to a random between 2 constants and set it between 0 and 0.5. Start color to a greenish color. And I'm going to make sure play awake is on. And set emission rate over time to 50. And give it a quick play to test it. Yep, looks good. And then drag the particle system object into your prefabs folder to create a prefab. And then delete it from the scene. So this object, just like destroy explosion sound, needs to be destroyed after it's done its thing as well. So drag the same script we created before, which was destroy timer, onto the prefab. So you could attach that script into any amount of prefabs or objects in the scene you like, and it will destroy them all within 4 seconds. Cool, now let's get back into the block script and let's get this thing working. Okay, so as with the sound, we also need a reference to the particle prefab we just made. So public game object explosion particles. And now in our collision function, we just want to instantiate the particles object. So instantiate explosion particles, comma, transform.position, comma, explosion particles dot transform dot rotation. Now, with the instantiate destroyed explosion sound, it didn't matter where the object was in the scene because it was just playing a sound. But the particle object needs to be instantiated where the block actually gets destroyed. So we're instantiating it at the position of the block when it's destroyed, and the rotation of the prefab itself, well, remember we flipped it 270 degrees, so we want to keep that rotation. So we're using the rotation of the actual explosion particles object. Cool, let's save this. And now click on the block in the hierarchy and add our particle system prefab to the empty field. And we are ready to go. So let's run this. And click the block. Cool. Bounced around a little bit, blew up, got an explosion with the sound and the particles. Now, I'm sure you could do a lot better with some playing around to make this look way better. Now, just before we wrap this video up, also to note, you can also add these particle systems as children to the block by right-clicking on the block and selecting Effects and Particle System and just adding one there, or by dragging one in that you've already made into the hierarchy as a child. Then the particle system would go where the parent object goes, so there's endless possibilities. So as I mentioned earlier, the particle system is pretty massive, so it does require a video for itself. But this was just to get you up and running. Now, this video probably got a little bit longer than I expected, so here's a quick recap. So the sound, just 3 parts to the audio. There's the listener, which is pretty much just got to be there, and it's usually left as is. The audio source, which controls the audio, we only used play, but if you take a look in your block script and type audio source and a dot, you will find other controls, including volume, bypass effects, pause, stop, all sorts of stuff. So have a play with that. And then, of course, clip, which is just the sound that you want to play. Now, the particles. Particles was pretty quick because the system itself is what you really need to play with. But it too can be controlled just like audio. You get the component in the script and play with it. However, the old system used to access the particle system is now obsolete. Before you could do this. Now you'd have to do something like this. Maybe I should actually make a whole video on particle systems now I think about it. Alright, so I think that about does it for this video, so I hope to see you in the next one.